Now it's time to meet a new animal. The new animal is the walrus. The walrus lives near the beaches and the oceans. It has 2 ivory tusks and 4 feet that are used as flippers. The walrus likes to drift along on large pieces of floating ice. A walrus eats clams. The story of Wally Walrus. Wally Walrus was very proud because he was so big. My, but he was huge. He had a great wrinkled body rolling with fat and a tough, rough hide. He had whiskers that bristled and he had 2 enormous tusks hanging down from each side of his mouth. What a fierce-looking creature Wally Walrus was! Now maybe you wonder why he was called Wally Walrus. Such a funny name for a walrus. Well, it seems that when Wally Walrus was born, his parents were so proud of him. They wanted to give him a very dignified, important sounding name. They decided that Wallhauser Walrus was a fine sounding name. Wow! Wallhauser Walrus. That was all right when he was small, but when he became a young walrus who ran and jumped somewhat clumsily and played tag, Wallhauser Walrus was just a bit cumbersome. His playmates soon shortened it to Wally Walrus. They were not making fun of Wally Walrus. They just needed a shorter name to call him. Now, Wally Walrus was big enough for a big name like Wallhauser Walrus, but everyone was used to calling him Wally Walrus. It seemed awfully unfriendly to yell, "Hey, Wallhauser Walrus, come and play with us!" So he was still Wally Walrus to his friends. Wally Walrus liked some things about being big. No one could push him around. He was just too big. But sometimes he got tired of dragging around his big fat body. "I wish I were little like you," he said to a grasshopper one day. "Why would you want to be little like me, Wally Walrus? I think it would be fine to be huge like you. You have no idea how hard life is when you are as small as I am." "You have no idea how hard life is when you are as big as I am. I tell you, it is really neat to be small." "Let's change places," said the grasshopper, not really meaning it. "All right," said Wally Walrus, not really meaning it either. That is what happened. Wally Walrus did not know it, but he had become very tiny. Suddenly, Wally Walrus looked up in surprise. What was that enormous foot lying near his head? It was long and thin and green. What kind of creature was this? He looked up. There were gigantic green legs like a grasshopper, an enormous head with 2 bulging eyes, and it looked like a grasshopper. But Wally Walrus knew that never in this world had there been such a huge grasshopper. Wally Walrus decided to move a little farther away before that enormous foot slipped and stepped on him. But there was something in his way. A huge boulder almost the size of a tree. Where had that come from? It was not there before. Wally Walrus had been standing on smooth gravel. Now all around him, as far as he could see, were large rocks that he could not even climb over. What had happened? Suddenly, it began to get dark as something came between Wally Walrus and the sun. It looked like a huge maple leaf, big and flat. Wally Walrus scrambled furiously to get out of the way. Splat! The big leaf almost missed him, but one corner hit Wally Walrus with a thump on the head. Oh, but he was dizzy. He sat for a moment, perfectly still, trying to figure out what had happened. What had caused everything to change? How had everything in the earth suddenly gotten too large for him? Or was it Wally Walrus who had changed? He could not figure it all out. The breeze which had blown the maple leaf onto Wally Walrus began to swirl around again. It was a playful west wind, the kind that used to tickle his nose. Now the west wind didn't seem playful. It did not just tickle his nose. That west wind knocked Wally Walrus right off his feet. Plop! He went down on his knees. Before he could think or even stand up, there was a whoosh, and the west wind lifted him right off the ground. The west wind was carrying Wally Walrus right through the air. He was so stunned he could not believe it. How could the wind pick up a big walrus? It was incredible and unbelievable. He knew now what had happened. He had somehow become small and everything else had stayed the same. Poor Wally Walrus, carried around by the west wind. I thought it was hard to be big, said Wally Walrus. That was because I had never tried being tiny. Now that I have tried it, I don't think I like it very much. I want to be my right size again. Wally Walrus wasn't sure just what happened, but he went plop into a field of tall grass. It wasn't exactly an easy landing because he was so big, but it was not nearly as bad as landing on a rock. He shook his big head and rubbed his eyes. Everything looked right again, and he hoped it was. Being big is right for me, Wally Walrus said, and I'm sorry I ever complained. You just can't understand someone else's problems until you have had them. Wally Walrus looked around him contentedly. Really, I'm just glad to be me, the size I am, the way I am. It's a mighty good thing just to be satisfied. A person who trusts in Jesus does not have to worry or fret. He knows God will care for him. He can be satisfied with what God has given him, and the way He has made him. You can be sure that God made you just as you are because He wants you to do a job that only you can do. A good man shall be satisfied. Proverbs 14:14.
Ready? Sing. Wally the walrus went walking one day. Along came the west wind and blew him away.
Walrus reads W. W reads W.